So we're starting chapter 12 of your consumer math book. And this is the last chapter of the book. And we're going to be talking about starting a small business. And we all would like to do that someday, is to have a small business of our own. And so this is actually a good thing for you guys. A small business can be from, selling, lemonade on the street and to being a large entrepreneur, really. And we'll find the definition of a small business compared to a big business, right? Well, in 1980 to 1990, small businesses in America created 13 million jobs, and big businesses only created 3 million jobs. So most people are interested in small businesses in America. So, and what is an entrepreneur? Well, an entrepreneur is someone that begins their own business. So let's get going here and talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur. Beginning a small business, talking about assets and liabilities and balance sheets and ratio analysis and income statements, ratios related to sales, payroll, break-even points, trade discounts, storage and inventory, credit. All these things have to do with a small business. So let's start here. We're going to start in section 12.1 that talks about the small business. I'm going to focus right here. As you can see in your book, it talks what a small business is. And it talks, first of all, what an entrepreneur, and we went over that. An entrepreneur are those that want to begin their own business. And a small business usually has fewer than 100 employees. So according to the CED, the Committee for Economic Development, listed 4 characteristics of what makes a small business. Business must have at least 2 of these characteristics to be called a small business. First of all, the management of the firm is independent. Usually the managers are also the owners. Yeah, usually a manager that owns his own business, right? And capital is supplied by the ownership and is held by individual or small groups. It's not by shares and bonds, but a capital is supplied by the person that owns the business. And it may, most of the time, is an individual. Number 3, the area of operation is mainly local. That means supplying the local area with the workers and owners living in their home community. However, the market need not be local. You can actually have a business like, manufacturing purses and shipping them off to other areas, but the area in which you live is the area in which you work. The relative size of the firm within the industry must be small when compared to the biggest units in the field. This measure can be in terms of sales volume, number of employees, or other significant comparisons. So relative size, that means the size of your bill is usually small compared to the huge businesses that are around. So you can tell the difference between the size in terms of how much you sell and how many employees you have. So and this time that we live, there's a lot of new small businesses. When we talk about 600,000 new businesses. Usually starting a new business can be risky business. In fact, 50% still that have started businesses in 5 years, after 5 years, there's only 50% are still operating. So small business can be pretty risky to most people. So an entrepreneur, as for an entrepreneur, usually an entrepreneur, if you're interested in being in starting your own business, and an entrepreneur has certain characteristics of high energy, perseverance, resourcefulness, being flexible, being creative, being independent, and they need to have some knowledge of management experience, right? So, but a big prerequisite of having your own small business is to have capital. So let's talk about what capital here is. What is capital? Capital is to have the capital or the money to begin the business. So usually they have a worksheet that can be put together that can tell you exactly all your potential incomes, that you have, and estimate your future sales and volume, wholesalers, and all these things to see. But basically having that capital to decide how much money is needed you prepare this worksheet which has this potential income to see if you have enough capital to start your business. There's two types of capital listed here. We have the owner capital, and 2/3 should be owner capital. Owner capital is what the owner has in capital and cash. To begin on a solid base, 2/3 of the capital used to begin should be owner capital. And then you had, according to the standard creditor capital. So we have creditor capital. Creditor capital is basically that you have to borrow to start your business. What you have to borrow to start your business. According to the standard business ratio, $1 profit to $20 sales is what you need to have. So you need to at least sell $20 worth of sales to actually earn $1 profit. So expenses. What do the expenses include to start a business? Such things as expenses. Here, let's look here in your next page so we can move the book over here so you can see. The expenses to begin a new business. So you need licenses, you need things for expenses to begin a new business, fixtures and equipment, installation of fixtures and equipment, the beginning inventory or merchandise to be sold, license and permits, public utilities and deposits, legal and professional fees, cash on hand, and other types. So you can see the types of business expenses you need to be aware of when you start a business. And then the monthly expenses of the business you have to take in hand too. Such things as paying your employees their wages and rent, or a mortgage payment on that building that you're using to sell, or basically that building where your business is. Supplies, advertising, insurance, taxes, including FICA and MQFE. So those are taxes that you have to pay. Maintenance and other varies with type of business of what kind of things you need for your monthly expenses. So you take those into hand, the expenses to begin and then onto the monthly expenses. So the standard ratio, when we talk about a standard ratio, let's go back to what I said in your book here. A standard ratio is basically that $1 to $20 sales, and an owner usually earns 5% on sales after all expenses are paid. So that's important to know, that you're only going to earn 5% after all your expenses are paid. If you expect to earn a salary of $20,000 as the owner of a small business, your business must have a minimum of $40,000 in annual sales. So, or 400,000, 20,000 to 400,000 in annual sales. So you have to figure out how much money do I need to make in order to bring in a profit in my small business. So that's the beginning of the small business. Let's look at the model problem here. What kind of model problem they want to give us here. Fred plans to open a jewelry store and needs $25,000 in capital to begin the business. He personally has $18,000 and will borrow the remainder from relatives. How much must he borrow from relatives? And what percent of the needed capital is to be from the owner, as we see here. So we look to find out the amount they must borrow. You subtract the owner capital from the needed capital. So we know his needed capital that he needs is $25,000, and he has $18,000 of owner capital. So he needs to borrow what? $7,000. You subtract that and you get $7,000. And then if you go on to find what percent of the needed capital is owner capital, so 18,000 is what percent of 25,000. So whenever you're asking for a ratio here, like in this situation there, when you're asking for a ratio, you're always going to have a percent. So it's 18,000 over 25,000. Reduce that to 72 over 100, which equals 72% owner capital. So to find out what percent of the needed capital is to be owner capital, find what percent 18,000 is of 25,000. Owner capital over needed capital would be that ratio. So that's what you can look and see whenever you have that ratio. Always remember that you're going to be doing a ratio was going to be at finding a percent, right? So let's go on to section 2. And we're going to be talking about assets and liabilities. This is a short section, but you need to know what assets and liabilities are. So assets and liabilities, assets are things owned by the business, including the debts that are owed to you from other business claims. So basically assets are things that are owned by the business. Assets are also called resources. Those are your resources. And then liabilities, on the other hand, are amounts that you owe to others. You're purchasing on credit. If you owe the bank something, you have a liability to the bank, right? So, and then going on to find out what your net worth is there. What is your net worth? Your net worth is going to be, net worth equals, if you look up here, net worth equals assets minus liabilities, and it tells how much you are worth. Now, if your net worth liabilities are more than your assets, your net worth is going to be in the negative, which means that your business is running in the negative, and you know that you owe more than you're taking in, right? So that's important to know. So and then otherwise, if your assets are more, you'll be into positive. So owner's equity is their net worth. So what your equity is, your owner, another term for net worth is owner's equity. Means what you own. What are you worth? What is your business worth? Okay? So let's look at this model problem here real quickly. And you'll be doing some problems like this. Okay, let's see if I can home in. John owns an appliance store. The business has the following assets, and he lists the assets. He has cash, new merchandise, used merchandise, delivery equipment, property, accounts receivable, and store supplies. The business owes Freedom Bank, his liabilities, owes the bank $215,410, and so anyway, we want to find the total assets, so you just add them all up. Pretty easy problem though it looks. So here we go. Here's a list. He added all the assets up here, and then he went down to find the total liabilities, what he owed the Freedom Bank and the manufacturing company there, and the liabilities, and added these two together, and these were his liabilities and these were assets. And now you want to find the net worth. You're going to find the assets minus the liabilities right here. So you have the assets minus the liabilities, and that's the net worth. These are pretty easy problems. I don't think you'll have a problem with this. So let's go on to the next section. We're going to buzz through these. Section 3. Section 3 is talking about the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is exactly what we're talking about, the assets and liabilities. So we can find out how much the company is worth, how much your net worth is, you know, how much is the owner's equity, how much equity do you have? So let's look at these. You can see here a picture of it, the balance sheet. So the balance sheet is the statement of financial position, a worksheet that lists your assets, liabilities, and net worth there are two categories that you need to be concerned with. One is the current and the other is the fixed. And you need to know what the difference between the current and the fixed are. The current assets are cash assets or assets that can be converted quickly into cash. Current, you think of like I always think like a river current flowing. Current assets are flowing in and out. You know, those are the current assets. Fixed assets are those that are fixed, such as the building and land and equipment and furnishings, those things that you need to work, but they're fixed there. They're your fixed assets that you own that don't change on a daily basis. But current assets change. So current assets would be like cash assets or those that are converted to cash. And then the liabilities are the same way. So the current liabilities are the debts that are due. So what do you owe? And on a monthly basis, what do you owe? Fixed liabilities are long-term debts, such as borrowing mortgages from the bank or bonds. So fixed are more long-term, and current. Just think current are constantly moving. That's kind of important that you know what the difference between current and fixed. So assets can be current and fixed, and they're going to be on the left side of your balance sheet. Let's look at the balance sheet here. Okay, so you see on the left side, you see the assets there. So here's the balance sheet. Let's put a little bit up so you can see a little better. Here we go. So on the left side, you see the current assets are cash on hand, cash in the bank. These are changing all the time. Accounts receivable, those accounts you're taking in. Merchandise inventory, the merchandise goes currently through. You buy and sell, and those are your total current assets. And then the fixed assets are like the building and the land and the equipment, delivery trucks, total fixed assets. So you have your total assets here. So you know this is the balance sheet. So these are all your assets on this side. And then on the right side here, we have the liabilities. And so the liabilities are like the current liabilities would be like your accounts payable, your notes payable, what you have to pay, your total current liabilities. And then on to the fixed liabilities, like of course you have a mortgage that's fixed there that you pay maybe on your building, long-term notes, total fixed liabilities there. And then you have, you can find your net worth at any time, and your balance sheet just kind of tells you to find it. The total assets and the total liabilities. You have $182,000 of total assets, and a total liabilities is $182,000. So they are equal on each side in this balance sheet to balance out your assets and your liabilities. Like this is the thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but to everyone that is hasty only to want. Well, anyway, it says not to be hasty, but to plan is basically. And so we have the current assets there. It's a picture. Fixed assets like a truck, delivery truck will be fixed, and onto the current assets. So that's the balance sheet. And you will be looking there, some exercise on the balance sheet there. And we're going to go on to ratio analysis, and I'm going to do this in the next video, because the next few sections are all going to be about ratios. Remember, ratios represent percent. You're comparing two things on a ratio. We're going to talk about the current ratio and the quick ratio, and then we're going to go on to sorry, I just dropped it. So let's stop there.